Do you remember when having a home intercom felt like living in the future? When you could press a button in the kitchen and talk to someone upstairs without leaving your chair, that gentle crackle of static, that faint echo, it made you feel like your home was something out of the Jetsons. Today, though, we just yell across the house or use our phones. But back then, that little metal panel on the wall was a badge of luxury. There was a time when luxury in a home didn't mean voice assistants or heated floors. It meant features that told your neighbors you'd made it. Maybe you didn't have a mansion, but if your living room had shag carpeting or your bathroom had a colored toilet, you were living large. This is a trip back to that golden era of status symbols, when homes were loud, proud, and unapologetically flashy. So, let's open the door to the past and step inside 20 home features that once screamed luxury. Take the built-in intercom. It wasn't just practical, it was prestige. Imagine the sound of that small speaker popping on, the soft hum before a voice came through. "Dinner's ready," a phrase that traveled through a maze of wires hidden in the walls. Installing one meant you'd invested in cutting-edge convenience, a kind of early smart home system that made you feel ahead of your time. But now, those systems look more like haunted house relics, yellowed by time, with broken knobs and dead circuits. Today, your phone does it all. Still, you have to admit, it felt good to press that button. Wouldn't you love to hear that static again, just once? Then there was wall-to-wall shag carpet. Remember how it swallowed your feet whole? Every color of the rainbow, burnt orange, avocado green, goldenrod yellow, like someone poured the 70s right into your house. You could drop your keys and not find them till morning. Cleaning it was a nightmare, but man, did it feel plush. It was luxury under your toes, a texture that said, I don't live in a cold house with tile floors. I live in comfort. Of course, today it's the opposite. If you walked into a modern home and saw lime green shag, you'd think it hadn't been updated since disco died. But back then, it was everything. Do you remember the way it muffled sound when you walked barefoot, almost like walking on clouds? And how about those sunken living rooms? You'd step down 2 or 3 little carpeted stairs into what people proudly called the conversation pit. It wasn't just a design choice, it was theater. That drop in the floor created a sense of intimacy, of gathering. The space felt private yet connected, like a cozy den built for laughter and low lighting. You'd imagine hosting guests there, drinks in hand, everyone lounging around on curved sectional sofas that wrapped the room. These days, open-concept layouts reign supreme, and conversation pits are seen as tripping hazards. But at their peak, that step-down was a statement piece. If you had one, you were living in architectural art. Do you still remember that satisfying feeling of sinking down into the pit and feeling like the night could last forever? Then there were mirrored walls. Oh, the drama of it. A single wall covered entirely in reflective glass, your own personal disco, expanding the room and catching the light in ways no paint could. People installed them in dining rooms, bedrooms, even hallways. It made everything feel twice as big and twice as glamorous. You'd catch yourself in them, mid-conversation, adjusting your hair or outfit without missing a beat. It was all about illusion, about transforming your home into something grand. Today, they're relics of a time when homeowners wanted everything to shine. Most people ripped them out decades ago, but think about it. Didn't those reflections make every dinner feel like a scene from a movie? Speaking of reflections, let's not forget the chandelier, especially the crystal kind. You didn't just hang a chandelier, you installed status. The way light fractured across the dining table, throwing patterns across the ceiling, it was pure magic. It was something you polished before a big dinner, making sure every glass droplet caught the light just right. Even if your dining room was small, a chandelier made it feel like Versailles. Today, we've replaced them with sleek pendant lights or minimalist fixtures, but the chandelier still holds a kind of nostalgic power. If you ever had one growing up, you remember the sound of it swaying ever so slightly when someone slammed a door, a tiny symphony of wealth. Another unmistakable symbol of sophistication was the wood-paneled den, deep, dark walls lined with polished panels of mahogany or faux walnut. The air felt heavier there, like a cigar lounge or a private library. It was where men retreated after dinner to talk politics, sports, or business. The smell of varnish, mixed with maybe a hint of whiskey, it felt mature, grounded. If your parents had a paneled den, it was where the good furniture went, the kind kids weren't allowed to climb on. These days, wood paneling is either kitsch or making a comeback under the word mid-century modern. But back then, it was wealth in wood grain. And what about built-in bars? Every house in the 70s and 80s worth its salt had one, sometimes tucked into a corner of the living room, other times proudly centered like a stage. Glass shelves, mirrored backdrops, gold-trimmed decanters, and the soft glow of recessed lighting. Everything about it said, "We entertain." You didn't need to go out for a cocktail. Your home was the lounge, the sound of ice clinking in tumblers, the soft hum of laughter over music. These were the nights that defined suburban luxury. Now, it's all about minimalism, with wine coolers hidden behind cabinetry. But doesn't part of you miss the boldness of that built-in bar, the invitation it gave to slow down and talk? Let's not forget the colored bathroom fixtures, pink toilets, mint green tubs, powder blue sinks. It's easy to laugh at them now, but at the time, those hues were a design revolution. Your bathroom wasn't just a functional space, it was an extension of your personality. The whole room coordinated, matching tile, matching towels, maybe even a fuzzy toilet cover that never stayed straight. These colors brought warmth into what was once a cold, clinical space. Nowadays, everything is white, gray, or black, all sterile minimalism. But when you picture those soft pastel rooms, don't they somehow feel alive? Then came the built-in vacuum system. You'd plug a hose into the wall and whoosh, the whole house connected to a single central unit, often tucked away in the garage or basement. It was the ultimate modern convenience. No lugging around heavy canisters or tripping over cords. The sound it made, a deep, satisfying whoosh, felt like technology doing the heavy lifting for you. For many, it was as close to living in a futuristic home as you could get. Today, it's rare, replaced by cordless vacuums or robot cleaners. But back then, if your home had one of these, you weren't just clean, you were advanced. And last for this stretch, let's talk about interlocking brick driveways. You might not think of bricks as luxury, but at one time they absolutely were. A brick or cobblestone driveway told everyone that you cared about presentation. It wasn't poured concrete, it was craftsmanship. The crunch of tires over patterned stone was its own kind of music. You'd step out of your car, look back, and admire the neat geometric perfection under your feet. Today, asphalt dominates, but a brick driveway still carries that air of quiet prestige. If you had one, you probably remember sweeping it after rain, proud of how rich it made your home look. Each of these features told a story, not just about wealth, but about aspiration, about what it meant to arrive. These weren't just materials or gadgets, they were reflections of who people wanted to be, futuristic, refined, or simply comfortable. And even if time has made them look outdated, their memories still carry that same shimmer they once did under chandelier light. Remember when a jacuzzi wasn't something you booked at a resort, but something your neighbors bragged about having in their backyard. Back then, the hot tub was more than bubbles and jets. It was the crown jewel of home luxury. The soft hum of the motor, the rising steam under a night sky, the glow of those little underwater lights. It all said one thing: success. Owning one meant you'd made it past the point of practicality and straight into indulgence. It was where deals were whispered, relationships sparked, and parties always ended. Today, you might call them dated, but in their prime, they were the definition of cool. Do you remember how people used to gather around them, wine in hand, pretending to be in a music video? Then there were waterbeds. Yes, waterbeds. Those sloshing, unpredictable symbols of modern comfort. You'd sink in and feel the gentle motion beneath you, like floating on a calm lake. It felt alive, responsive, almost futuristic. Advertised as being good for your back, they were really about bragging rights. You have a waterbed meant you lived life differently. Of course, they leaked, they sloshed, and they weighed a ton. But for a time, they were an icon of sophistication and sensuality. Today's memory foam beds can't compete with that sense of novelty. Tell me honestly, didn't you always want to try one, just once? We can't talk about home luxury without mentioning built-in stereo systems. Picture this: polished silver knobs, a tangle of thin copper wires running invisibly through the walls, and music floating effortlessly from room to room. That was power. That was prestige. You could be in the kitchen and still feel the bass from the living room. It was seamless entertainment before Bluetooth or AirPlay ever existed. The walls themselves sang for you. Now, we take wireless sound for granted. But back then, installing one meant calling in specialists and spending thousands. And when it worked, oh, it was magic. Do you remember the first time you controlled the whole house's music from one panel and felt like a genius? Of course, the kitchen had its own trophies too. Take the double oven. Nothing screamed gourmet home louder. The metallic gleam, the warm hum, the way holiday smells filled the air when both were running. If you had one, you were either a chef or wanted to look like one. Hosting Thanksgiving? No problem. Cookies on top, turkey below. It was domestic power embodied in chrome. Today, it's all air fryers and countertop gadgets, but the double oven once stood for abundance. It meant you didn't just feed your family, you entertained. Can you still remember how hot the room got during those big meals? And no one complained because it meant the feast was coming. And then came the built-in telephone niche. That little recessed alcove in the hallway with a shelf for the phone and maybe a pad for notes, sometimes even a small chair underneath. It wasn't just a spot for calls, it was a moment, the place where you'd lean, twisting the cord between your fingers, whispering secrets or gossiping for hours. It was functional, yes, but also theatrical, a mini stage for teenage confessions and late-night talks. When cordless phones and cell phones took over, the niche vanished. But if you ever had one in your house, you remember how the phone's ring echoed down the hall and everyone raced to pick it up. Didn't it feel like life's most important conversations always started there? Then there was the grandfather clock. Tall, solemn, dignified, its slow tick and deep hourly chime commanded attention. You didn't just own a grandfather clock, you inherited it. Even if you bought it yourself, it made a house feel established, timeless, like your family name had weight. Its polished wood and swinging pendulum gave rooms a certain gravitas. Now, they're rare, replaced by smart clocks or silent walls. But back then, their chime filled homes with a rhythm of permanence. Can you hear it now? That low, resonant tone that made silence feel richer? We can't skip over crystal ashtrays. It sounds strange now, but in mid-century homes they were centerpieces. Even if you didn't smoke, you had one. Usually heavy, cut glass that caught the light just right. It was part of being adult. It sat on coffee tables like a trophy, surrounded by magazines and coasters. People didn't hide smoking, they made it part of the aesthetic. The gentle tap of ash, the soft curl of smoke, it was elegance defined. Today, that would be unthinkable indoors, but once upon a time, a crystal ashtray told visitors that you understood class. Did your parents have one too? The kind that weighed more than a small brick? Let's head back outside for a moment, to the lawn sprinklers. Not the cheap plastic ones, but the in-ground, timed irrigation systems. Back then, having one was a big deal. It meant you didn't have to drag hoses around or stand outside sweating in the sun. Your lawn stayed green automatically. You'd hear that soft click at dawn, followed by the gentle hiss of water sweeping in perfect arcs across the yard. It was the sound of affluence, the suburban equivalent of applause. Now, sprinklers are standard, but in the early days they were futuristic. Do you remember watching them spin? The sunlight turning every droplet into a tiny prism, inside again. How about ceiling fans with ornate pull chains? Long before smart climate control, these fans were both functional and decorative. Brass finishes, frosted glass light shades, chains with little figurines on the end. The soft whir of blades was soothing, hypnotic even. When you pulled the chain, you weren't just changing speed, you were engaging with the mechanics of comfort. Today's homes hide air conditioning behind vents, but there was something personal about those fans. You felt connected to your space. Did you ever lie back and watch the blades spin slowly overhead until you drifted off to sleep? And speaking of comfort, we can't ignore heated bathroom towel racks, a detail so small yet so luxurious. You'd step out of the shower, and instead of grabbing a cold towel, you'd wrap yourself in warmth. It was a hotel-level indulgence right at home. The chrome glistened, the soft hum filled the air, and for a moment life felt just a bit grander. Today, most people skip them entirely, but if you ever had one, you know, it wasn't about function, it was about feeling spoiled. Now, picture this: a house with a formal dining room. Not a corner of the kitchen, not a table near the couch, a room just for meals. The chandelier hung low, the china cabinet gleamed, and the carpet underneath was always spotless. Families dressed up for dinner, even if it was just spaghetti. It wasn't just eating, it was ceremony. And while open-plan layouts have made dining rooms nearly extinct, their memory still carries a certain dignity. Remember those long meals with candles flickering and soft music playing in the background? That was home elegance at its finest. And finally, the pinnacle of domestic pride, the built-in wall clock radio, usually found in the kitchen. It had that satisfying click when you turned the knob, the faint buzz before the station came through. The local news, morning weather, maybe a bit of Sinatra. It filled the home with life. Its face was metal, its sound a little tinny, but it felt dependable, eternal. Before Bluetooth speakers and smart assistants, that clock radio was the heartbeat of the household. Moms timed roasts by it. Kids rushed to school with its alarm, and its glow at night was oddly comforting. Can you still picture it above the counter, the way it ticked softly under fluorescent light? Luxury has changed, but nostalgia hasn't. The things we once admired weren't just products, they were promises. Promises that life could be a little easier, a little brighter, a little more beautiful. Each one carried a small piece of the dream of progress, and even though time has moved on, those memories are still there, hiding in the walls, the carpets, and the echoes of homes we once called perfect. And then there were the home saunas. Yes, right there in your own basement or master bath, sometimes paneled in cedar, sometimes barely big enough for 2 people, but to anyone who saw it, it screamed wealth. You could feel the heat radiating off those wooden walls, smell that distinct mix of dry timber and humidity, and hear the soft hiss of steam when water hit the rocks. In the 80s, having a sauna meant you weren't just successful. You cared about wellness before self-care was even a buzzword. People would brag about sweating out toxins, sitting there with towels wrapped around them, imagining they were in a Scandinavian spa. Now, home saunas are rare relics of excess, overshadowed by gyms, infrared panels, or, more often, repurposed as storage rooms. Still, if you ever walked into one and felt the air tighten with heat, you remember the quiet luxury of it. Just across the hall, another kind of statement piece waited, the bidet. Imported, exotic, and decidedly European, it was the conversation starter of its day. Most people didn't even know how to use it properly, but having one in your bathroom said you were worldly. A regular toilet was fine for everyone else, but a bidet? That was refinement. It was porcelain proof that you'd seen things, been places. These days, people buy smart toilet seats with water functions. But it's funny, what's modern innovation now was once just an eccentric luxury that guests whispered about in confusion. Do you remember your first time seeing one and wondering what on earth it was for? Moving outside again, few things match the prestige of having a swimming pool in your backyard. Not a community pool, not a hotel one, yours. The glint of sunlight on blue water, the smell of chlorine, the sound of kids laughing and splashing. It was the soundtrack of success. It wasn't just recreation, it was reputation. You hosted barbecues, summer parties, and lazy afternoons where time seemed to stop. Maintaining it was expensive, sure, but it didn't matter. It was worth every penny for that feeling of pride when someone said, "Wow, you have a pool?" Today, we see them as high-maintenance luxuries. But if you grew up in a home with one, you still remember those endless summer evenings when the water reflected the sunset and everything felt golden. Let's talk about built-in bookcases. Once upon a time, they weren't just practical, they were an intellectual flex. Floor-to-ceiling shelves filled with hardcovers, family photos, maybe a globe or a record player chandelier tucked in between. The smell of old pages mixed with polished wood gave the room a quiet sophistication. Guests would scan the titles, subconsciously measuring your taste and education. In the days before tablets and ebooks, your library wasn't just storage, it was identity. Now, open shelves serve as decor backdrops for minimalist homes, but the old built-ins had character. Do you still remember the satisfaction of sliding a book back into its perfect slot and hearing the faint thud of knowledge meeting wood? Another thing that defined home luxury, especially for the ambitious suburban dreamer, was the formal sitting room. Not the living room, not the family room, but a pristine, untouched space meant for guests. It often had furniture you weren't allowed to sit on unless company came over. The cushions were perfectly plumped, the carpet spotless, and the air smelled faintly of furniture polish. It was the room of appearances, a shrine to the idea of hospitality. Even as a kid, you probably knew not to touch anything in there. Today, we laugh at the idea of keeping an entire room just for display, but back then, it was the ultimate expression of class. Can you picture your parents' voices saying, "Don't go in there, that's for guests"? And who could forget the home office before working from home was common? In the 80s and 90s, if you had a home office, it meant you were somebody. Big oak desk, brass lamp, leather chair that creaked when you leaned back. The smell of paper, ink, and maybe a hint of coffee. It was the scent of power. Fax machines hummed, calculators clicked, and filing cabinets stood like metal sentinels guarding secrets of success. Now, we work from couches or coffee shops, but that room symbolized ambition. If your dad or mom had one, it wasn't just a workspace, it was their domain. Did you ever peek in, see the briefcase sitting open, and feel like you were looking at something sacred? Then, there were motion sensor outdoor lights. They might seem ordinary now, but when they first arrived, they were futuristic. The idea that lights knew when you walked by, that was technology straight out of science fiction. The soft click, followed by a burst of brightness, gave a sense of safety and modernity. Neighbors envied that glow that came alive automatically, casting your driveway in brilliance. Nowadays, every porch light can be connected to an app, but those early sensors were pure magic. Do you remember testing them as a kid? Waving your arms just to watch them turn on? And let's not forget the attic fan. Not an air conditioner, not a vent, an actual giant fan that pulled air through the whole house. When it roared to life, you could feel the shift, the temperature dropping slightly, the curtains fluttering, the house breathing. It wasn't just cooling, it was ingenuity. Those who had one felt thrifty yet advanced, harnessing the elements instead of wasting electricity. The rhythmic hum of it at dusk meant the day was winding down. Today, it's all about silent AC units, but that old fan had soul. Do you remember lying in bed, listening to its distant whirring as you drifted off? Another subtle luxury was the dumbwaiter. Found mostly in older or multi-story homes, it was a hidden elevator for food or laundry, a mechanical helper that made life smoother. You'd open that little door, place a tray or basket inside, and with a rope or button, it disappeared into the walls. It was elegance through engineering, the kind of feature that guests would marvel at. Most are long gone now, sealed up or forgotten, but they represent a time when even household chores could feel like magic. Then came home theaters, before streaming, before soundbars, a big projection screen, velvet curtains maybe, rows of recliners if you were really fancy. The room would darken, the projector would hum, and the flicker of light would transform your home into a private cinema. Popcorn in hand, slippers on. You weren't just watching a movie, you were hosting an event. Back then, that setup wasn't common. It was the holy grail of luxury. Now, everyone carries a screen in their pocket, but the idea of gathering for a movie night, surrounded by that warm, mechanical whirring, still feels special. Do you miss that ritual? The sound of reels spinning, the hush before the first line of dialogue. Even something as simple as a decorative doorbell used to be a status symbol, a two-tone chime that echoed melodically through the house, replacing the harsh buzz of earlier ones. Ding-dong, elegant and polite, like the house itself was greeting you. Some even had elaborate mechanical chimes hidden inside brass boxes mounted on walls. These days, doorbells have cameras and alerts, but they've lost the charm. The sound that said, "Company's coming and life's about to get interesting." Don't you kind of miss that warm, musical welcome? Finally, the pièce de résistance, the master suite vanity, a little built-in makeup station with soft lighting, a wide mirror, and a cushioned stool, often tucked beside the bathroom. It wasn't just for makeup, it was for moments. Quiet rituals before work, gentle routines before bed. It represented care, elegance, and self-worth. The drawers smelled faintly of powder and perfume. The bulbs glowed like a halo. Today, minimalism has stripped these personal corners away. But if you grew up seeing one, you remember. It wasn't just a vanity. It was a throne for everyday grace. All of these features, from the shimmering chandeliers to the buzzing intercoms, paint a portrait of how people once defined success. Luxury wasn't about brand names or minimalist design. It was about feeling that your home was an achievement, a sanctuary, a reflection of dreams made real. And though the world has changed, those moments, those little sounds, textures, and lights still live in us, because deep down, the real luxury was never the feature itself. It was the life that happened around it, the laughter, the comfort, the pride. And then there was the ultimate mark of domestic sophistication, the fireplace, not the sleek electric ones you see now, but a real brick-and-mortar hearth, the kind that glowed with genuine flames and snapped with the sound of burning wood. You could smell the pine, feel the warmth radiate across the room, watch the shadows dance on the walls. Having one, especially with a mantle lined with family photos and polished brass tools beside it, meant you weren't just keeping warm. You were living a kind of quiet luxury. The fireplace wasn't just a heat source, it was a centerpiece. People gathered around it during holidays. Conversations lingered longer in its glow, and it made even the simplest night feel cinematic. These days, people click a remote and get instant ambiance, but nothing compares to that crackle and the slow build of real warmth. Do you remember how, when the fire dimmed, you'd poke it back to life, just to keep that glow a little longer? And right above that hearth, or somewhere else just as prominent, there was often a grandfather portrait, or, better yet, an oil painting of the family. You didn't need to be nobility, you just needed the right frame and confidence. It was a visual statement, permanence, pride, legacy. The golden frame caught the light, and the faces within looked slightly more dignified than they ever did in person. It wasn't vanity, it was aspiration. In a world before social media, those portraits were your version of a blue checkmark. They said, "This family matters." Today, we fill walls with candid photos and travel shots, but back then, one grand painting said it all. Do you still remember how visitors used to stop and say, "Is that really you?" before quietly nodding in admiration? Another gem of mid-century affluence was the automatic garage door. It might seem mundane now, but when it first arrived, it felt like wizardry. No more stepping out in the rain, no more wrestling with heavy wooden panels. You pressed a button, and the door rose smoothly, humming like a machine from the future. It wasn't just convenience, it was status. The neighbors noticed that little remote clipped to your car's sun visor. You were modern, forward-thinking, living in tomorrow. Today, garage doors are silent and app-connected, but they've lost that sense of wonder. Back then, hearing that motor whir to life after a long day felt like being greeted by your house itself. Can you recall the comfort of that sound, echoing through the driveway at night? And who could forget the wet bar in the basement? It wasn't just furniture, it was lifestyle. A marble countertop, glass shelves glinting under recessed lighting, maybe even a mirrored backsplash. There were always a few fancy bottles on display, whether anyone actually drank them or not. It was about hosting, about confidence, about offering guests something special. The hum of the mini fridge, the soft clink of glassware. It was suburban glamour at its peak. Today, most basements are gyms or playrooms, but those bars were once shrines to sophistication. If you ever saw one, you know exactly what I mean. That strange mix of excitement and awe when your parents let you sneak downstairs during a party to see the grown-ups laughing with drinks in hand. Then there was the interlocking pattern of parquet floors. You remember those, right? Tiny squares of wood arranged in geometric perfection. They gleamed under the light, polished so often you could almost see your reflection. Walking across them in socks made you feel like you were gliding. It wasn't just flooring, it was craftsmanship, patience, precision. It told visitors that your home had been made with care, not just poured and painted. Over time, many of those floors were ripped out, replaced with uniform planks or tiles. But parquet had character. Do you remember how it felt under your feet? How the sunlight would catch those squares at just the right angle in the afternoon? And in the kitchen, oh, the kitchen, there was the built-in spice rack, usually a narrow cabinet that slid out from the wall or popped open like a secret compartment. Tiny glass jars lined up in perfect rows, each one labeled neatly. Paprika, cinnamon, nutmeg, oregano. Even if you didn't cook much, it made you look like you did. It wasn't about the spices, it was about order, about control, about feeling like you'd mastered the art of homekeeping. These days, people toss spices into drawers or buy racks online. But back then, that custom-built wall slot made you feel like a professional chef. Can you still smell that faint, comforting mix of herbs and wood whenever you think about it? Moving down the hallway, many homes featured decorative glass blocks, those thick, translucent cubes that let in light without sacrificing privacy. They turned sunlight into art, scattering it across the floor in patterns that shifted with the day. To have them meant you were stylish and practical. They were futuristic, architectural, almost European in feel. Now, they're often dismissed as retro relics, but for a while, they represented the height of design. Do you remember how they glowed at sunset, soft and golden, like honey trapped in glass? And for the tech-forward homeowner of the 80s and 90s, having a home security system, complete with blinking red light and keypad by the door, was peak modern living. That little panel with its numeric buttons made you feel like a secret agent. Armed, stay, the robotic voice, the steady beep. It was control embodied. Even if the system barely worked, it was the symbol that mattered. You were protected, advanced, part of the future. Now, our phones monitor everything, but that red light once meant power. Did you ever punch in the wrong code just to hear it beep and reset, pretending you were disarming something important? Finally, we end with the ultimate status symbol of domestic design, the bay window. A graceful curve of glass that reached out into the world, catching sunlight and drawing eyes from the street. It made rooms feel open, elegant, alive. People filled them with cushions, plants, sometimes even cats that sat there like royalty, watching over their kingdoms. The view framed by those windows wasn't just scenery. It was a painting of your life, shifting with the seasons. Today's modern architecture prizes minimalism, but those windows invited warmth. If you ever sat in one, you remember the way the afternoon light wrapped around you. How even silence felt comforting there. All these things, each sound, texture, color, formed the language of luxury in its time. Homes weren't just built to be efficient, they were built to make you feel, to impress, to soothe, to symbolize that you'd achieved something worth showing. And though technology and taste have evolved, the essence remains unchanged. The same desire for comfort, beauty, and pride still drives us. It's just disguised in cleaner lines and smarter screens. Maybe one day people will look back on our stainless steel appliances and voice-controlled lights the same way we now look at shag carpets and intercoms. They'll smile, shake their heads, and say, "Can you believe people thought that was luxury?" But for us, those things weren't just features. They were dreams made tangible, aspirations you could walk through, touch, and call home. Because the truth is, luxury has never been about money. It's been about memory. The creak of the parquet floor, the echo through the intercom, the glint of glass block sunlight. These are the things that make a house feel alive. And maybe, just maybe, that's the kind of luxury we've been chasing all along. If you enjoyed watching this video, then go ahead and click on any of the cards on your screen for more.